one of the things I would love to promote is encouraging people to make that leap of faith towards themselves, whatever that looks like.
I love
right
this.
now.
Take a chance.
Take a chance.
Get out of that comfort zone.
Get out of the comfort zone. And I'm not saying necessarily buy a ticket and go to a country. I'm saying take a step in.
This is episode 31 of 1F Jeff.
31 arrives like a turning point, the opening of a Saturn cycle, a season of reckoning and rebuilding. In tarot, it resolves to 4, the number of foundations, where creativity settles into form. The body mirrors it with 31 pairs of spinal nerves, threads of sensation running through us, and even the word 31 stands apart, every letter appearing only once, a small linguistic singularity.
Hello, my friends. Here we are. We are here. 2026. It's happening. Another year is happening. Every year that comes, I'm just like, whoa, really? And yet. About 2 years ago, my friend Brad asked me if I wanted to go to a sound bath. I had been to a couple sound baths at my yoga studio, and it was mostly just like a guy who brought a bunch of sound bowls and other random instruments like didgeridoos and stuff, wandering around, playing the instruments while we all lied on our backs, listening to them. And I liked it, but I wasn't like, whoa. But this sound bath I went to with Brad was different. It was on a full moon, and we go to this building, which was an old church, and you walk in, and it's this entire vibe. I mean, there's like cool projection lights. There's like all these stations with different, fortunes and different tarot cards and different kind of things you could do. It was really something else. And then the sound bath begins, and it's less a sound bath. It's more a sound concert. We're lying on our backs with pillows and everything. And he's got like 10 musicians kind of wandering around this space, playing different instruments. And he's planned it all out to kind of go through like an hour-long meditative thing. It's really incredible. My mind was blown. It was like, whoa, this is happening in Columbus? And after that, I went to 7 or 8 of them. And had some profound experiences in these sound baths. And the man who created this sound bath concert experience is my guest today.
Jesse Cale is a musician, poet and meditation guide, best known as the founder of HOM. His work lives at the intersection of music, language and contemplative practice, using sound not as performance but as a doorway into listening, presence and altered states of awareness. Drawing from his background in music and poetry, Jesse approaches sound baths as a form of composition and inquiry, creating immersive experiences shaped by tone, rhythm, silence and attention.
And I'm really glad that we could make this happen because Jesse is a fascinating guy, as you'll hear. He has had a very interesting life and has a very interesting perspective on life. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Here's Jesse Cale.
I've actually been enjoying trying to be boring.
Enjoying trying to be boring. I like the sound of that. Boring.
I had some meetings, walked through a business for we're doing a sound bath in an office, and they were walking me around.
I just got the email about the Dayton one.
Yeah. Where we've got a few coming up in Columbus, so you don't got to go all the way to Dayton if you want to go to one.
Are you coming back to the one in the church?
No, we're not doing that venue anymore. I'm trying to do like just smaller, more intimate ones. And we're doing the Columbus Museum of Art in the spring.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, so, I saw you did with East Forest there, yeah?
Yeah, we did that last March, so we're going to do it again in March. I'm not sure who we're going to bring in. We might actually bring in an artist from Japan.
Oh, cool.
This woman, Jun Futamata, she's incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how you got on my radar was, it was about 2 years ago, a friend of mine, Brad, he was like, you want to go to a sound bath? He had actually gone on a Hinge date to one of your sound baths.
Nice.
And I'm like, sure, I'll go. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And my mind, I'll be honest, like my mind was blown. I've been in this city for like 7 years. It was one of the coolest things I discovered in this city.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. It was like a revelation. I was like, oh shit, man.
Amazing.
And then I ran into people that I knew from like yoga studios, like Anastasia.
Totally.
So yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
doing that. That
Oh,
was a really
man.
amazing thing.
That I mean, hearing I don't poke and prod and I don't ask. You know?
Right.
But when people share stuff like that with me, it means so much.
No, I've
know.
had some profound experiences at your sound baths.
Thank you.
How did those get started?
Oh man, it depends on how far back we want to go.
All right. Well, how much time do we have? Were you born in Columbus?
I was born and raised in Columbus.
Okay.
Yes, I was
All
actually
right.
born and raised not too far from here.
Oh, right on.
Yep.
Right
yep.
on.
So actually, yeah, over North London.
Okay.
So I guess I'm back close to home. You know. So
I grew up in Cleveland and lived all over, and then came back to Columbus. So I'm getting closer to home. As it
cool.
were.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Oh man,
Yeah.
Cleveland's got a cool vibe.
Yeah, I like Cleveland a lot. I have mixed feelings about Columbus, but I like Cleveland a whole lot. It's got a.
That is so fair.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's hard to
absolutely.
argue with.
Yeah. absolutely.
Columbus needs it needs to figure out what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it needs to figure out.
It doesn't have an identity.
It doesn't have enough community space.
That's true.
You know.
That's true.
And I think the identity would be born out of that, but because, you know, people all being together
Yeah.
would give birth to something, but it's just a city of islands.
Yeah, and
You
it
know.
has too much football.
you know, I'm glad that we have one thing that we have like major pride in, you
right.
know,
Right. I guess that's true.
I'm
yeah,
not,
that's true.
I'm, you know, I don't follow the Buckeyes anymore. I did when I was little growing up.
Yeah,
of course.
me too.
But, yeah, and that was always a fun thing. And then I got older and realized that not everybody cares about college football. And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
what?
yeah. When I moved back here, I followed them before I moved back here. Like not as a huge fan, but still I'd follow them.
Yeah.
But then I came back here and I saw the cult-like thing that goes on, and I was just not really.
For sure.
But I've just alienated probably 100% of my audience. So,
Yeah, no,
whatever.
No, it's super fair. You know, it's definitely for a specific demographic, which
Sure.
Columbus really caters to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio definitely.
Yeah.
You know, being a big college town, having all of the major headquarters of corporations that we have here.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it is very much for the kind of professional moving through life and
Yeah.
loving football.
So
and
what
beer.
was it like growing up here? What was your early years like?
So that is where we can start to get to the sound baths, because it really was like out the gate, you know. I was born into I was homeschooled.
Okay.
I was born into a Christian home.
Okay.
But it was a branch of Christianity that really put a lot of emphasis on like miracles and magic.
Huh.
And
What is there a name for this branch?
Yeah, so it was called Empowered Evangelicalism.
Huh. I'd
Yeah.
never heard of this one.
So it was born out of the Jesus freak movement of the 70s.
Okay, so like a little hippie-ish, little.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely in its roots in some hippie
All right.
qualities,
Which is
you
what
know?
Jesus was.
For sure.
So
absolutely,
right. This is
yeah.
where they've gotten lost. Is they've forgotten that Jesus is just a hippie at heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, my parents would host people at the house, and they would play music, you know, and I loved it. You know, my dad was a musician. My mom would play guitar too. They both sang. And they would sit quietly, and they would, at the time, they would say they're quote unquote waiting on the Lord.
Sure.
And they would just sit and listen. And then after a few minutes, everybody would kind of come back to, and then they would have like prophetic, they called it prophetic words for each other.
Oh,
but
it's
it was
like Quakerism in a way. Like it's
Yeah.
adjacent.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They just sit and wait for the.
yes, for a
yeah,
message
yeah.
to come through.
Yeah.
And it was very much that. And, you know, I was 1, 2, 3, 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
you know, watching this take place, and people were getting these messages for one another that were very profound. And I would see the emotional response that people would have.
Huh.
And then they would do hands-on prayer, you
Okay,
know,
yeah.
which there's so many that runs through so many other
Reiki
practices.
adjacent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reiki is, you know, another form. And I would watch just these like really radical emotional and physical responses take place that were seemingly profoundly touching, healing, and moving for people.
Okay.
And I was very little, and being raised with that being a fundamental,
Yeah.
was what really, it just led me into this place of wanting to be close to that type of relationship with the intangible, you know.
Huh. Was
So-
the music good, or was it Jesus music?
It was worship music. It was Jesus music,
Okay.
you know, but there were like some songs that just had wonderful chord progressions.
Sure.
And my dad was a great guitar player,
Sure.
acoustic guitar,
Yeah.
and I just loved it. And you know, running simultaneously to that, my dad would just, you know, put on records, just be like, "Oh, you got to listen to this. Oh, you got to listen to this. Just play me music all the time."
Right.
My brother started guitar lessons, and I had an experience when I was 4 years old that really like set it off. You know, this is going down a more spiritual route, and it does tie back into. I mean, it really ties back into the sound bath stuff
Sure.
later on. But I had a big weight fall on my foot when I was 4 years old and crushed one of my toes, and my mom didn't know what to do, you know, so she just picked me up and she laid her hand on my foot and she prayed for it, and it just went back to normal.
No
Just
kidding.
immediately. Yeah. The pain went away. The color came back.
And do you attribute this, I mean, from where your headspace is now, do you
Yes.
attribute this to divine power, intervention of some sort, or do you, I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And I've thought about that a ton because
Right.
as I've had to kind of change the context, reframe it, I really think that what allowed it was what we could call as a poetic term of faith, you know, and the power that belief can, I don't know how else to say it, like shift reality essentially.
No, I get it. I
you
mean,
know?
there's validity to the power of prayer, and I think that it goes
Oh,
along with
absolutely.
even like I don't think it's just prayer though. I think it's just energy being, you
Of
know,
course.
it's
Yeah.
all.
Yes. Yeah.
So it checks out, but
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's kind of fascinating. Do you remember how the weight was like?
Oh yeah, I remember it very well. Yeah, there was my dad had left a 45-pound like barbell weight on the couch, and I discovered centrifugal force. I started pushing it
Science.
into the cushion, and I was like, oh, if I get a rhythm, I can get it to bounce higher and higher. And so I was just playing with the rhythm of it. Meanwhile, it's slowly edging towards the end of the couch.
Right.
And then there was just a cement floor. It was in the basement. And the thing just came down and just boom, right on my toe. You know, got my toe right between the floor and the
And
weight.
your toe's good now, though.
Oh yeah,
Oh, good.
everything was
That's
fine.
great.
It was just after my mom came down, you know, and she prayed for it. It was just
I have some arthritis in my toe. I wonder if your mom could.
she. You know, what's funny is she was a pastor in one of the biggest churches here in Columbus for a long time.
Okay.
And now she is a witch.
I mean, it's a path.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. You know, and it's just discovering this relationship with energy or the universe or whatever you want to call it. You know, however
Yeah.
people want to have a relationship with it, and just finding what comes into agreement when it comes to language and kind of the shape, the face, and the context. You know?
Right, because it's all kind of the same idea, just wrapped in different packages, right?
Yeah, and same idea, and I think a lot of it is, you know, because ideas can get into categories, and it's since it is such a like amorphous thing that it really is just like more of feeling rather than idea. You know?
Right.
So-
It's unfortunate that this feeling is often clouded by people's personal beliefs and personal things they're trying to layer on what Jesus meant to say and so forth and so on.
For
right?
sure.
Was it the religion that you were involved in? Was it? It doesn't sound terribly strict, although you were homeschooled. Was it?
Yeah.
Was it restrictive or was it?
It was definitely conservative. Yes.
Okay.
You know, it was conservative. It was funny because my parents were pretty loose compared to a lot of some of the other families in the church, and
Right.
I went to a private school for a short window of my life, and that was much more strict and conservative. But you know what? As I look back on all of it, I'm so grateful I was raised in a fairly soft environment because I'm a very sensitive person.
Right. me too.
And
yeah.
you know, I can look back on that and be like, wow, if I was in just rougher environments and
Yeah.
less gentle, you know, situations of care and relationship, and I probably would be a much more, I would be different
Yeah.
in a way that
I'm
I'm glad I'm not.
Yeah. I'm extremely sensitive as well to a degree that
have learned to, as I've gotten older, like accept and kind of and embrace. But when I was younger, it was just kind of a mess because I'm just an open wound, kind of in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that the religious upbringing kind of gently helped you through
Absolutely.
that period. Yeah. So how did after? I mean, at what point does music start? I suppose. What did your music start?
Totally. So my dad would play me records all the time, like I was saying.
What kind of records?
He was really into prog, like prog rock.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like Yes?
And yeah, absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh. Close to the Edge is one of my, it is an old fave. But anytime he would put on, some prog. He also loved like Genesis and King Crimson.
Right.
And he would play me, but then he would play me artists like Kraftwerk.
Oh.
And then he would play me, there was this Japanese modular synthesizer mastermind named Tomita. And he would play me anything that he would play me. So this is where prog kind of plays into it. Anything that had a synthesizer.
Huh.
Anytime I heard synthesizers or electronic instruments, I would just feel this overwhelming sense in my body ever since I was very, very little.
Huh.
So when I was 6 years old, I already knew this, but I didn't know, since there wasn't a lot of it. I didn't know how to point at it. Rock music was everywhere, you know?
Sure.
And then this Christian artist named Joy Electric.
Big fan.
You know Joy Electric?
No, I don't.
Oh, I was gonna say because if you're into electronic music, a lot of people discover him because he is a analog synthesizer just genius.
Oh, really?
This man, I think at one point in time, I don't know if he still has them, had like 100 analog synthesizers. He had like almost his own analog synthesizer like museum. And he would put out songs. There's a Christian radio station here in town called Radio U.
Okay.
They started, I think, in 95, but in 96, I heard a song by this artist, Joy Electric, on the radio, and it was like being struck by lightning.
Huh.
And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. I want to play the synthesizer. I want to work with sounds. I love sounds.
Right.
So my grandfather that Christmas got me a little Casio keyboard.
Sure.
I started piano lessons, secondhand piano lessons from a woman at the church, wonderful lady. And I just started taking piano so that I could grow up and, first of all, find out where the hell I can find a synthesizer.
Right.
And then, it just went from there. And I got like a recording software game when I was 8 years old. And then my dad worked in tech. He was in IT, and he got me my first actual recording software program for the computer in, I think it was 99 or 2000.
Which one was it?
It was called Acid Music.
No, I don't remember that one.
It was a fairly like underground. It was used by a lot of electronic music producers.
Okay.
And the company that made them, Sonic Foundry, had some really popular other programs like SoundForge that tons of artists honestly to this day still use, which is cool. And then we got a Korg synthesizer when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
And my brother and we would just, I loved abstract ambient instrumental stuff. I was listening to a lot of that. And I would just make this abstract instrumental ambient stuff when I was really little. And
like
then
music for airports kind of thing.
Totally Brian Eno
Right.
vibes. Yeah. That was another one that my dad would put on every now and then. And then when I was 11, I went to, as when I started my private school, and I remember showing up with a tape of my original music and playing it for people on the bus. And they're just like, "This is you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What the hell is this?" Because it's just this really
blowing their minds a little bit.
Yeah, they were like, "This is weird," and I was like, "I was like, oh, I love it."
Yeah.
So that was
That's
the
crazy.
start of my life in music. But running concurrently was my my spiritual life. So I had this example of seeing these people sit in a quiet space and listening. And so often I would just sit in my room and meditate.
Right.
I didn't know it was called meditation. That was a
Right.
bad word back then,
Sure.
But I would just sit and I would talk to God and would have just these really sweet, beautiful, really tuning into the subtleties moments. And then I started doing it while listening to music. And, I just started having these really, really profound, crazy, wild, supernatural experiences.
And this
all
is
the
still Jesus based at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
At what point does that shift into something other than Jesus? Or is it still? I don't know.
Right. That's a great question. I moved to California when I was 21.
Okay.
And I eventually officially kind of decided I was leaving the church when I was like 25.
Why'd you go to California?
So I was doing music. It's funny. I was playing keyboard for a Christian rapper. And simultaneous to playing with him, his brother and his brother's at the time partner, they started a business for YouTubers.
Okay.
And they were working with all of the top YouTubers at the time and creating essentially like a YouTube production management marketing conglomerate.
And this is early YouTube, so
Very early YouTube, yeah. So this was 2010 when that really started to get some traction. And then the rapper that I was playing with, he was like, "Hey, I'm moving to California to work with my brother to run the music department. So we're kind of done here." And then after he moves, he hits me up and he's like, "Hey, do you want to start writing music for some of these YouTubers?" And I pitched a song. And
do you remember what it was?
Oh yeah, I remember what it was.
What was it?
So you're gonna love this.
I know.
So I'm gonna write a biography, and I'm gonna tell you the name, and then I'm gonna tell you the stories, and then it's gonna be called "Ass and Titties Changed My Life." So, so the reason I say that is, there was a comedy band. It was the #1 music channel on YouTube.
Okay.
And it was this guy, Ray William Johnson. He was the #1 YouTuber
Okay.
on YouTube at the time. He was doing kind of an America's Funniest Home Videos version on YouTube called Equals 3. And he had a cartoon band, kind of like the Gorillas, a cartoon band, but it was doing just kind of crass comedy.
Right.
Right. And I got a call and it was like, "Hey, do you want to write and produce a comedy song? And I'm going to try to sell it to this guy, to this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And if they like it, we'll pay you."
Yeah.
So I wrote a song called Tiggle Bitties, and it was just this full on electronic pop song. The chorus is just saying Tiggle Bitties over and over again.
And have you played it? Have you played it since? Have you just let that go?
Well, I have not.
I think you should pull that out at a
Yeah,
sound
at a
bath.
sound bath,
Just out of nowhere.
You're not the first person to say that.
Anyway.
So I, I was 21 at the time, and I was like, okay, these are middle school boys that are watching these videos.
Yeah.
They love boobs.
Yeah.
So I was like, we're gonna do this song. So I wrote this song. I sent it to them, and apparently, the guy who was listening to it, his brother was in the room, and his brother was just crying, laughing, and they were like, "Okay, this is the one." So they bought the song from me. They recorded it. They put it out, and it blew up.
Tiggle Bitties.
Yeah, Tiggle Bitties. It was #1 on iTunes.
Is it still out there?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
still
wow.
Find it.
Yeah, right
And so that happened. They were like, "Hey, good job," and they were like, "You're basically in the door now. Do you want to do another one?"
Right.
And so I was like, "Okay." If the demographic is young boys, they also love video games.
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
wrote a song about video games, sent it to them. They recorded it, put it out, did great.
Wow.
And so they were like, "Cool, we're gonna give you a house and a music studio. Come out to California."
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I moved out there when I was 21, and I started producing music for YouTubers like 20 hours a day.
And is this creatively satisfying for you, or is it like a means to an end?
It was definitely a means to an end.
Right.
I by the age of 21, I had put out 12 of my own original albums.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So I was very much into that. And there's a lot of nuance to them bringing me out to California. They were like, "Hey, we're going to sign you. We're going to put your music out. We're going to invest in you. We're going to make you an artist," all this stuff.
Yeah.
They never did any
California
of that.
stuff, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. So I learned young,
Sure.
Yeah. But it gave me tons of great experience. I met some of the best friends that I have in my life today.
Oh, nice.
It was really, it was 2 very, very, very incredibly difficult years, but also I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
So,
it's those experiences, I feel like, that are the ones that shape you as a human, right?
Absolutely.
So, especially in your 20s too. So
yeah, for sure. It was my first time away from home. It was my first time in a startup environment.
And were you making bank? Were you making?
No.
Oh, all right.
No. But
Tiggle Bitties didn't pay off.
Well, they made. I signed a contract without getting a lawyer. I'll say that.
Yes.
So I should
that's
have.
the biggest mistake, I think, is what they say.
I would have been making bank, but
Right.
instead I was.
Exploitation, I hear that's a big thing there in LA in the
Yeah.
entertainment industry. Yeah.
Oh, it's not just LA. It's
Oh, sure,
everywhere.
sure.
Yeah, no, it's so, but it is what it is. And honestly, as I look back at my life, I'm so glad that nothing I was working on then worked out because
Right. You'd be making Tickle Bitties, the 8th version of it at this point.
Yeah,
You'd be
exactly.
like, all right, I'm tired of this.
Right before we left, we were working on Tickle Bitties for Snoop Dogg.
Sure.
So it was.
Did
it
that
was-
ever happen? Did Snoop Dogg ever record a version of Tickle
He was
Bitties?
working on. We were working on one.
But it never actually.
No, it was a
that's too
whole.
bad.
That is a whole story. So the project after I moved there lasted for about 2 years, and then there was an intellectual property dispute,
Yes.
and everything shut down.
Did you
so.
meet Snoop Dogg?
I did, yes.
Oh, how's that?
It was fun. He came into my studio briefly, and he's like, it was just this funny little interaction. He's just like, "What it do, gentlemen?" And I turned around, I was like
Yeah.
making beats, and he goes, "As you should be," and he just dapped me up and like vibed for a second, then walked out. So
And now he's selling cell phones or whatever.
yeah, he's doing he's
doing everything. Doing
he's a
everything. Yeah, he
businessman.
sure is. He
Yeah,
sure has turned
for
into
sure.
a savvy businessman. That's Snoop Dogg.
Absolutely.
So 2 years in LA, and then you come back to Ohio.
Yeah. After about 2 years, I one of the other threads that runs into all of this and leads to the sound baths is my mental health.
Okay.
I was
You're
I'm an artist.
partying.
Well, I started drinking a lot in LA.
Sure.
I was never a drug person, but
Right.
I was definitely a drinker.
Okay.
So I was drinking a lot while I was working,
Mm-hmm.
and just all through my life, I'm a very melancholic person, and I just kind of have this thread of perpetual sadness,
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also promotes a deeply romantic quality that I really appreciate.
Totally relate to
you
that
know?
as well. Yeah.
So I really, I couldn't imagine looking at the world through different eyes,
Right.
But it's hard to carry. It's heavy.
It's yeah. And I feel like tying into the alcohol, I feel like especially with sensitive people like ourselves,
Yes.
I think it really does tone down that sensitivity a little bit and makes the world a little bit easier to function in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the allure, Be like, oh, I'm so uptight, and then after a few drinks, I'm just like, I'm enjoying this. But then
Yeah.
after a few more, it was like, I'm not enjoying this.
Right, because it's like anxiety. I feel like goes with the sensitivity in a way, and
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that all kind of snowballed. My job was changing a ton. The project had fallen apart, and I was dating somebody long distance in Ohio.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm going to move back to Ohio, take a break from music, figure out my relationship, and get therapy.
Were you dating that person before you went to LA?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I moved home, started therapy, worked at a Starbucks, took
I've
a
heard of
little
it.
break from music.
It's the coffee. The coffee.
Yeah.
The
Small
coffee- small little indie coffee place.
Single origin.
Yeah.
Once I moved back here, I started getting hired to play at a bunch of churches around town, and was just playing keys and doing sound. And I just, after being in an incredibly loving secular environment,
Yeah.
which is a funny word to use, but for me, it was different. And just being like, wow, these are some of the most like authentic, deeply, truly loving people I've ever been around. And there was no religious sense,
Right.
There was a lot of curiosity, and some of them had Christian backgrounds. Some of them did have like Eastern religious, backgrounds.
These are the
curiosity.
musicians you're playing with.
A lot of
Yeah.
the people I was around and worked with, and just
Right.
hanging out with, and just it was sweet. And I was running into I was like, this just isn't. I felt like I was looking through a peephole, when I was looking at my relationship with reality through the eyes of Christianity.
Oh, I see.
If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
it
was
does.
like, and that being said, people can hear that and have what kind of reaction to it, because we all have our different ideas around what language is. When I say Christianity, it ties into what they think it is.
Sure.
But I'm talking about what I was raised with.
Of course. Yeah.
So I had never let my mind go beyond those borders, and so when I was 25, I took a step back, and I was like, I want to look at the world and my beautiful, romantic, supernatural relationship. Like I said, having this experience when I was 4,
Yeah.
and then tons and tons and tons of miraculous experiences after that all the time. I'll tell you some.
Okay.
So you can kind of get a sense.
Sure.
When I was 21 and I moved to LA, I was there for a few months, and luckily my house was right by my studio.
Okay.
But I was like, I want to venture further, and I needed to get a car. I didn't have a car, and I also wasn't making much money. So a friend of mine calls me one morning, and she was just this, very, bright, fun, loving person. And she was like, "Hey, Jesse, what can I pray for you today?" And I was like, you can pray that I get a free car. She's like, "Okay, dear God, I pray that Jesse gets a cheap car." And I was like, "No,
Free.
I said free.
Right.
Like, keyword here is free."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Okay, haha, I pray you get a free car." She hangs up. About 2 hours later, I get a phone call from somebody, and they're like, "Hey, Jess, I was just wondering, do you want my car?" And I just knew it was this answer prayer. So I said yes. And there is a much longer version of that story that gets so crazy about how the miracle of that car continues to just play on and happen and happen and happen.
Give me a little more.
Okay. So she parks it about.
What kind of car is this?
Okay, this is the best part.
Okay.
She brings me the keys. Like I said, I live about 3 blocks from where my studio is.
Right.
She brings me the key. She gets it tuned up, a little bit.
Sure.
She brings me the key. I get it. I'm like, "Oh, thank you." She's like, "I parked it on the street next to the studio." And I walk out, and there it is. It's a little purple beat to shit Volkswagen Bug. And I was like, yes. I was like, look at my little baby, I walk up to it. I look in the window, and it looks like a bear had been set loose on the inside of it. I mean, this thing is torn to shreds.
Well, it's free.
And it's funny because I didn't look at it and go, ugh. I looked at it and I was like, this is my miracle.
Right.
This right here is my answered prayer.
Right.
This is
I
my
wonder
little-
if she had specified that a car had, like, if it's a nice interior, a free car with a nice interior, if it would have been,
Right.
Right,
maybe,
right.
yeah. Taking notes, I was
Right,
like, okay,
right,
next
right.
time, but all I saw was my miracle. I was
Right.
like, this is beautiful. So I'm like kissing it, and I'm like, yes, this is amazing. So fast forward about a year and a half later, I'm getting ready to move. I was like, I got to move back to Ohio, so kind of where we are in the story.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I've got this car. I've got to get rid of it. Shoot. Right after I decide that, there's street sweeping on either side. Tuesday, can't park there. Wednesday, can't park on the other side, whatever.
I lived in Brooklyn.
So
yeah.
I wake up at, it's street sweeping starts at 10. I wake up at 10:10, and I'm like, son of a bitch, and in my boxers, I just run outside. And I'm parked a block away. So I'm like running around the block in my boxers. And sure enough, I see the, the parking meter, the meter maid.
Yeah.
Not the best name, but I walk up and they're giving me a ticket. And the guy's like, "Oh, is this your car?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Dude, you're just doing your job. I slept in.
Yeah.
It's all good." And he's like, "Man, I've already put it in the system. I'm so sorry." And he keeps writing. And then he looks at me and he goes, "Can I buy your car?" And I was like, I literally had just decided to move and I needed to get rid of the car. That was like the first thing on my plate. And this guy is just writing my ticket. And then he's like, "Can I buy your car?" And I was like,
Kismet.
yeah, it was amazing. So, I was like, yeah, I'm moving in a week. So he met me at my moving truck a week later and just took the car off my
Did he
hands.
pay the ticket?
Well, he paid me $700,
Oh,
which was great 'cause
for
I
a
got the
free car. You want? Yeah.
Yeah, it helped cover gas for the way home.
Right.
So insane. So things like that. I had another experience where I was in Iceland and I was performing at a music festival when I was 18.
Okay.
And the bands were all staying in a school that was near the festival grounds. They basically just put mattresses and stuff in different school rooms for the bands.
Yeah.
So a group of kids broke into our room, stole our money. And since it was like a fairly small music festival, fairly tight community, word got out. And this woman comes up to us and she's like, "Hey, we heard you guys got robbed." Well, this was a Christian music festival because we were a little Christian electronic band.
Right. What was the band called?
It was called Fantastic.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I was thinking it'd be some sort of a the Christian band name.
Yeah,
so just trying
yeah. So this woman comes up to us and she's like, "Hey, can I pray for you guys?" We were like, "Sure."
Sure, why not?
She grabs our hands and she's standing there and she's like, "I pray that you get your money back." And we were like, "Thank you." And then she's like, "Never mind. I pray you get twice your money back. And we were like, oh,
Why don't you go for 3?
yeah. So we were like, oh, thank you, you know. And she leaves, and we go back to our room. And I'll never forget this moment. My bandmate is pacing around, like flipping a switchblade or something. I don't know. He always had a pocket knife. And I was laying down on a mattress. And then this woman walks into the room carrying a box, a different woman. And she's like, hey, I'm from the church next door, and we found out that you guys got robbed. So we took tithes and offerings, and we are going to give them to you. So here you go. And we counted out, and it was to the dollar twice what was stolen from us.
Huh.
And it was just these little answered prayer, little miracle things like that all through my life just kept happening.
You know, I kind of love this because it's so often in this world that Christianity is given this, you know, a bad rap, you know.
Of course.
And it's nice to hear stories like this that are like, you know, positive stories about Christianity, about, you know, because I think a lot of the times the stories we hear are people, you know, anti-abortion, so forth and so on. All that kind of
absolutely.
Things. So yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? There are so many things that I loved about Christianity.
Yeah.
It's rare to find in a culture that celebrates individualism, a group of people that collectively believe in something bigger than themselves, you know?
Yeah.
So for there to be a kind of communal kind of understanding and giving and centering around something that is outside of self, it allowed for such a sweet sense of trust in community.
Yeah.
That was so rich and so wonderful.
And rare.
Exactly. It was incredibly rare. And once I left the church, that was probably the hardest part and has been the hardest part.
Right.
You
Because
know?
I feel like community is the main thing we've lost in our society. And that's something that I miss. You know, I mean, that's, yeah.
And that was one of the big motivators for me doing the home sound baths, you know.
Well done. Yeah.
So, you know, moving on though, I had these amazingly rich, beautiful experiences with the listener, you know, whatever you want to call it, with God, you know, the whatever it was.
What did you call it at the time? Were you still
at those points in time? I was still a Christian, so I equated it to the God of the Bible. You know?
Okay.
But then when I was 25 and I left the church, I started to kind of divorce a lot of that language and a lot of that thinking, and it was very, very hard and very, very sad because it was such a tangible romantic relationship.
Well, it was your whole life.
It was my whole life, you know, and there was a lot in that. You know, so I had to just let go. And but it also led into just like kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my God, let's go check out Buddhism. Let's go look at, Hinduism.
Sure.
Let's get into Jainism. Let's look at esoteric practices. Let's get into various, you know, let's get into paganism and
right.
Let's go explore, you know, different indigenous beliefs and people in South America and, you know, just all over the place.
Let's see what everybody, you know, it's all the same kind of, the same ideas really, just told differently in a lot of ways in my experience.
Totally. And one of the things that really blew the lid off for me out the gate was Joseph Campbell. Mm-hmm. You know, the hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces,
which is interesting because I went to film school, and that's the same thing that they teach you in film school. Actually, is the hero's journey, because it's all this mythical, you know,
and that was, you know, that really was born out of Joseph Campbell and George Lucas with Star Wars. You know, consulted with Joseph Campbell, and he was like, here's essentially the plot. You know, here's the whole thing.
Right. But George Lucas stole from Dune, from George Herbert. Like that whole idea was. You want to get into that down that road, but still,
absolutely. Oh man, Dune's so good. Ugh.
Yeah, the new movies were amazing. I was like surprised.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Beautiful. So, you know, moving into the space of
what was the thing? Sorry to interrupt, but what was the thing that got you out of the church?
It was really just a lot. Well, it was a lot over time. It was being involved in the business of church for a long time, being behind the scenes and just seeing how gnarly it was.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the churches that started to hire me, I mean, were all about numbers and money.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I was like, this is boring and gross. And, you know, and It was very unattractive. It was
Right. Aren't we supposed to feed the poor instead of building a new church?
It was
yeah.
The one of the churches I played at, and this was one of my last services I ever played at. They were like, we're starting a fundraiser. We need to raise $22 million for our new campus.
Right.
You know,
right.
and it's crazy because they did, and now they're one of the largest churches in Columbus with multiple branches.
Is it Dwell?
No,
Okay,
I was actually,
all right.
it was funny because that was formerly Xenos.
Yeah, I know.
And
I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I have some
So-
friends who were. Yeah.
I've got lots of
There's some
history.
good, there's some
with
good stories there.
Yeah,
yeah
definitely.
Yeah.
You know, and I went to the worship pastor at the church that I'm talking about, and I pulled him aside. I was like, "Hey, man, I'm really struggling with drinking," and he was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that, man. And he prayed for me and all that." And the next week, he showed up and he gave me a handle of whiskey, and it was literally just like it was one of the most offensive, heartbreaking,
That's not a miracle.
disrespectful things.
Right. That's crazy.
I was just like, all right, you know. So shortly after that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go.
Why would wait?
Let me get out of
So,
here. So
did he say anything about like? Did he even address the fact that you just talked to him about having an issue with alcohol, or what was
no, what he said when he handed it to me was like, "I know you like to drink, bud," and he handed it to me.
Wow.
It was crazy.
just like Jesus intended? I think
it
right?
was so.
Well, it's
It
generous.
was one of those things where I
generous.
was like, "This is
Yeah.
funny."
Yeah.
I was like, "This is funny." It was also terrible whiskey, so I was like, "Man."
right, like bottom shelf whiskey. If he's gonna
Yeah.
get you whiskey, at least get you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I kind of started to kind of move away from that and explore all these other, you know, really what for the first time were allowed to be incredibly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
All of these new religions, myths, philosophy, you know, so many things
Right.
that my mind had just been kind of
Closed
off to,
Yeah.
you know, which was a bummer because I love stories.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a storyteller, and I was like, oh, this is good stuff. I was like, this is really great.
Right. right.
And you know, also, so running through with that, having this really rich spiritual life, kind of opening it up to new interpretations, new context, new ideas, new sensations, new practices. I also am still working professionally in music, you
Yeah.
know. And I went to my first sound bath shortly after that in California.
Okay.
And I went in there and I laid down and I was like, oh, this is amazing. But also like, because nobody, the person didn't talk about it being a musical experience. They were just like, this is, you know, and there was a lot of the standard language around
Healing.
sound
Yeah,
baths,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And I'm laying there and I'm having this powerful experience, you know, I very much go into kind of a theta brain state. I'm half awake and, you know, time disappears and I'm deep inside my consciousness. And I come out of that and I was like, that was all just a fundamental pad. I was like, you could add vocals, you could add strings, you could
Right,
compose,
right,
you could,
right.
and I was like, you could do so much. So I had that idea just planted in my mind.
Yeah, I get that. It's like that. I think is what was actually part of the profound. I mean, it was the whole environment of that church is kind of amazing. Number one, but like that you made it into a concert in a way,
Totally.
right? That you
Yeah.
turned it into a whole thing.
Yeah.
That was yeah. Are a lot of people doing that, or is this?
Well, so what was fun was, so I guess like kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I started to get more into kind of esoteric practice, you know, and started doing a lot of stuff around the full moon. Simultaneously, though, I was doing sound journeys where like I would take my mattress, I would put it on the middle of the floor, I would take huge speakers, push them up against the mattress, I would get a fundamental frequency, and I would kind of have my own personal ritual that I would go through, and then I would lay down and I would just blast off. You know, I would, and this was all without drugs. Like,
Right.
no
It's
drugs.
like the music or drugs for you. Yeah.
So I would just lay down on my mattress and I would have these speakers just blasting a tone and I would just take off, you know, and I would just have these really, really crazy, you know, astral projection adjacent kind of experiences. And I was doing that a lot. And it was, you know, within the same family as my meditation, you know, and so much of that. So going kind of where the mental health stuff ties in was I quit drinking for the first time when I was 26.
Okay.
I started getting really into nutrition and physical wellness.
Right.
And then once I kind of checked off the body piece, it was time to address a lot of the mind piece.
Yeah.
So I started to get into like regimented practices of meditation, exploring various practices of meditation, mindfulness, vipassana, and, things like that. And that led into a deeper and kind of different, more mature relationship with stillness and silence.
Yeah.
And then I started using, and then at night I would use these repetitive sound loops to put me into a hypnosis to journey, so,
right.
again, the sound bath, sound journey kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so I had all of these things going on. And fast forward.
Were you dating anybody while you're doing all these? And they're like,
There were relationships
trying to go to
on and off.
sleep.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
right.
sleep here.
They'd be like, they're like, they're sleeping. Meanwhile, like I'm on a different planet.
Right.
I wake them up. I'm like, you're never going to guess what this alien spirit thing said to me.
That usually happens to me after mushrooms, but if you can do it with music, it's
Right.
great.
Yeah. It's funny. So when I was getting ready to move back to California.
Okay.
And oh man, there were a few things that happened kind of all at once. One was I bought my first singing bowl set because I was like, oh, it's time to start experimenting with this. And I was like, but if I'm going to buy this bowl set, I have to do a sound bath. So I bought the bowl set kind of on a leap of faith. And then 2 days later, I got a phone call and it was like, hey, Red Bull needs a sound bath. Do you do sound baths? And I was like, yes.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
Wow.
Red Bull was doing like a
Never thought with Red Bull sound bath doesn't seem to. It's interesting.
It was like a regional corporate event,
Interesting.
So I was like, cool, and I with that got to bring what I had wanted to bring to sound baths that I had never seen or experienced before. So it was like I had acoustic guitar, I had piano, I had all these pads, I had all these rhythms and nature sounds, and on the fly kind of did it.
But it's
all.
still just you at this point. Okay.
Yeah. So and then there was an event space that was being held by a development company here in town. And they were like, hey, we've got this space for a year. We're going to do some fun events over the next year. And then we're going to build an apartment building here. So a friend of mine was responsible for booking those events. So she brought me into the space and she was like, hey, I've got this space. You do events. What would you do here? And I was immediately just like, I want to do one of my private full moon ceremonies here, She's like, cool, do it. She was like, whatever.
Sure.
So the next full moon was I think it was July 7th, 2022.
Okay.
And it was a giant old car showroom, huge cement cube.
Right.
I mean, the acoustics in there were so live. I dropped my car keys in there one time and the sound just went. And I was like, oh, a singing bowl in here would be crazy.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget bringing it in there for the first time and starting to play it. And the whole room just amplifies, just captures it. It was unbelievable. To this day, my favorite space to do sound
It's
baths.
so crazy. So I have a singing bowl, and my cousin was over, and I mentioned that I had a singing bowl. He's like, "What's that?" So I pull this thing out, and I start to play the thing.
Yeah.
And his mind was blown. He was like, "Bro." The day after, he actually texted me and said, "I think that singing bowl did something to me." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it does something." Because the sound
awesome.
feels like it comes from everywhere. It's such an interesting,
Yes.
Yeah. And you can almost feel the waves of sound coming off of the thing.
You totally can.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a circular idiophone, so it's like it's got this acoustic property that is so three-dimensional.
And when you play them, it's kind of interesting because you can kind of feel one with the bowl at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like get the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, she agrees to let me do this event. And I had been playing at I'd been playing piano at a spa in town.
Okay.
And there was a woman who worked there who I knew had a set of singing bowls. And I was like, hey, are your singing bowls in the same tuning as mine? And she was like, yes, they are. And I was like, do you want to do a sound bath together? She was like, absolutely. And I was like, great, because I need somebody to play bowls while I play piano.
Right.
She's like, cool. So I put together essentially the first ever what would become home
Pre-home,
sound bath,
yeah.
you know, and I've got piano, I've got these kind of nature sounds, we've got our singing bowls, we've got a few other instruments,
Mm-hmm.
and then, you know, we put everything up on Eventbrite, and it sells out, and it was just full. And I was like, whoa,
People are hungry for this kind of thing. Yeah.
And you know, it wasn't like 12 people, it was 65.
And post-COVID, I think that
That was a huge
Yeah.
factor. Totally. So I was like, oh my God, 65 people are going to be in the sound bath. I've never been in a sound bath that big in my life.
Right.
You know, and I was like, okay, let's do it. So her and I went to the garden store to pick out wind chimes.
Okay.
And we sat there, I think it was like for an hour. I found one, and I was like, okay, this is one. And we
Right.
went through like every wind chime and just quiet. We even went and asked them to turn off their fans. In
Sir,
the
are you going to buy something?
yeah, literally exactly that. You know, and I was just like, oh my gosh, we found the pair, and we both started crying because it was just like this beautiful combination of sounds.
Right,
you know, we
right.
put so much time and patience and intention into picking the wind chimes that we use at the end of the sound baths.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was like, okay, these are in a different tuning, so it's going to actually, it's sharper, which will wake people up a little bit, and it's in F major, which is where the heart is, and it's, you know,
Right.
just a half step from what's considered the happiest chord in the world, you know.
Right.
So I was like, this is perfect.
What is the happiest chord in the world?
They say it's F sharp major. So we do the sound bath, and the response was wonderful. It was beautiful. You know, we were like, I was so nervous. We were both very nervous.
Sure.
You know, I was just like, you know, I've performed tons in my life, but this is a
Different.
different level and
Yeah.
a different type of presence and responsibility and
Right,
sensitivity.
right.
You know, and then I was like, well, let's do it again. So we did the next full moon,
Okay.
filled up, and I was like, let's start doing the new moon too. That one filled up.
Sure.
It was just like, and every single sound bath was connecting me to just all these new people in town.
Yeah,
and I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, maybe I'll want to stay here. Like, I'm making all these new friends. You know?
Like this community that you didn't even know was there is suddenly appearing in your
and also so many people were coming there and making friends.
right.
And I was like, oh man, this is what I wanted. You
Right.
know? And I was also really into building the stations that were there, you know? So it started off with just, I had, you know, made a bunch of fortune cookie fortunes that were, you know, things
Yeah,
from my
yeah.
journals and different quotes. And then I was like, we're going to put up, you know, these cards. And I was like, oh, let's add more and more and more and more to
Yeah,
the point
yeah.
where we had a ton of things.
Yeah, you
know?
made it a whole experience. It's really amazing.
It was
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah.
You know, so as basically any of the ticket money that came in went right back into just like improving the experience. It was like, let's get candles, let's get, you know, more instruments, let's
Yeah.
get more musicians, let's get, you know, it just I hadn't been that in love in a long time.
Huh.
You know, because this experience was based on my safe place as a child.
Right.
You know, this
right.
little 4 or 5 year old me sitting in my room quietly, just listening. This was that.
And then you're like, this is your aha moment. Like, oh, here we
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, you know,
here I am.
The Japanese ikigai.
This is the thing that I've been looking for. And now, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've recently found a video of me when I was 12 with my brother, and we had an ambient band when we were in middle school.
What was this band called?
We were called Collected Fictions.
Okay, that's good.
Um,
Still waiting for a bad band name is what I'm waiting for.
yeah, right. Yeah. So, in this video we found is so funny. I'm sitting there and he's playing ambient guitar and I'm playing ocean sounds.
Okay.
And then I switch and I'm playing bird sounds.
Sure.
And then I'm playing rain sounds. And I was like, I'm still doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
It just took me a while to get from here to there.
To there, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it just kept going. And, oh man, home was so, I want to say so divinely carried. There was so many beautiful people that showed up. There was so many things that just happened right at the right time to allow it to continue to move forward. And it was so beautiful and so special.
It's totally true for me. Even like just discovering it and realizing this whole other side of Columbus, and that, you created something like magical there. And well done, sir. Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, I gave it my entire mind, body, heart, soul.
But isn't
you
it
know?
great when you find something that you want to give that to?
Yeah, and that's
know?
what I was saying. It
Yeah.
was just like, oh, and the only way I could do that was by how in love with it I was.
Right.
I was like, this is so, people say aligned, but I was just like, this is so me. Like I was
Yeah.
born for this.
And I think that was part of the vibe, is that people could feel it.
Mm-hmm. Good.
There
I'm
was
so
just
glad.
the energy in those spaces was just, it was something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good stuff.
Thank you.
So you moved to the other church, and then you did that for a couple years, to the church space.
We were in Gravity for a while, and then
Okay.
they were like, we're going to break ground, so you got to get out of here.
Right.
And then we moved over to the Municipal Light Plant, which is over by Crew Stadium. It's where the Yellow Crew smokestack is.
Oh, okay.
So that building, it was the first power plant. I'm pretty sure it was the first power plant in Columbus.
Huh.
Turned into a wedding venue office space. So we were in the MLP for about a year. And then Cameron, I believe it was Cameron Mitchell, came in and took over the building.
Oh, of course.
And they were like, it's going to be $25,000 to do an event here on the weekend.
Wow. Cameron Mitchell, not a sound bath guy. We've learned that.
I just I can appreciate a business model that is not emotional.
Yes.
Because I'm surrounded by a lot of emotional business.
I
models,
understand.
and it's,
That's hard. Yeah.
And it's hard because there's a lot of feeling there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, if they could just show up and be like, hey, love what you're doing, but it's going to be $25,000. I'm like,
Right.
what? Good for you.
Right.
Then the Sanctuary, which is where we were for about a year and a half, which is where you came to church over there on Neil. That we were just like, okay, we're going to make this work.
It's a cool space.
It was a really cool space. Parking was a little tough.
True.
But a lot of growth and a lot of great stuff happened in there. You know? So yeah. And
so you did it for a year and a half there, and then you started I saw you doing them in the caves and the Olentangy Caverns or something. Was that?
Yeah. So kind of, we always had the recurring full moon, new moon, winter
Yeah.
solstice, summer solstice, the equinox events going on. And we started doing a ton of stuff outside of that. We have practitioners in different states.
Okay.
We do, rehab centers. We do corporate stuff. We do private stuff.
Okay.
We do rec centers,
And this is all started with home, and then just kind of grew.
It all grew from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And kind of going back to something you said earlier was like, has anybody done this before? And I hadn't seen the kind of concert style sound bath done before.
No, me neither.
But I knew that it was coming. I was like, it's too obvious.
I mean, it seems that way now.
Yeah, totally. And sure enough, now, I mean, that's most of what I'm seeing out. Like there's all these large events that look a lot like home.
Right. Right.
And I think it's great.
Sure.
I don't feel possessive whatsoever about that.
Because how can you be? Because you can't copyright what that is, right?
Yeah.
You can't own that, right?
Yeah. Even outside of that, it was never a personal representation. Showing up in home was always this place of service and of love.
Right.
And it was my playground.
Like
I
your
was
church.
like, I was like, I get to have fun here.
Yeah.
I was like, I love getting to show up and do these experiences. It's just as satisfying and opening and healing and wonderful for me as it is for some of the people that would show up and use the space for, however they needed it.
Yeah.
And it was never about trying to sell something and put my name on it,
right,
which was so relieving for me as an exhausted artist.
Right.
I was like, oh God, I think I'm not trying to be like, hey, go stream me online and, buy my t-shirt, kind of thing. So
it's a complicated thing too, because you're doing what you love, but you also do want to make money. You also want to live.
Totally.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
So it's a comkomplicated, I guess that probably had to be a complicated dynamic in that sense. Is like, how much money should I make from this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. That was definitely another whole part of it. Again, I was still working through a lot of that period.
Okay.
I was doing a lot of freelance music and freelance composition, and I was a product photographer for Dungeons and Dragons dice.
Sure. Why not?
I've had an interesting set of odd jobs.
How do you get to be a photographer of Dungeons and Dragons dice?
So I was the music director for a video game studio for a while.
Okay.
And there was a I believe he was the interim CEO, and he left the company and was working for a toy company, and they specifically made dice. And he was like, "Do you do photos?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You play Dungeons and Dragons?" I was like, "Yes." He's like, "I'm going to send you a bunch of dice." I was like, "Okay."
Right. As if playing Dungeons and Dragons makes you qualified to take pictures of the dice.
Yeah, yeah. You know, he asked if I could, and I actually had a photo suite at my house.
Okay.
So I did that for a little
Shot
while.
the hell out of those dice.
Yeah. It was cool because I mean they were like
They're cool looking dice.
really wild. You know,
I
It was
mean,
cool.
just the dice with all the like 20-sided die is a cool looking. Yeah.
Yep. All the different
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
But with that, you know, kind of getting into kind of the business of what does this look like, you know, functioning in this holistic world. And then I had voices coming at me from so many different directions.
Sure.
You know, I had some people saying like, "Oh, you got to do everything for free." And this is actually hilarious. The first home sound bath, well, before it was home, that very first sound bath,
Yeah.
I went to the person who was responsible for the venue, and we sat down, and I was like, "I want this event to be free." And she's like, "Babe, I love your heart. But if you do this for free, you will never do another one ever again." And I was like, okay. There's so many kind of mechanisms there that she was referring to. One is if you make a free event, people will register, and because they registered for free, they won't value it, they won't show up.
They won't show up. Yeah.
Yes. So you will have a bunch of empty spots, but you will have a full booking.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's kind of a broken relationship there with energy exchange. What is your time worth? You know, people
yeah.
being like, "Hey, I love that this act of service, you want to be an act of giving."
Right.
But you are also giving not just your service, you're giving your time.
Right.
And, you know, that needs to be worth something.
Right.
You know, so she was just kind of like, you know, don't make it free. You don't have to make it expensive.
Yeah.
So
I think we need that person in our lives to tell us.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And since then, through doing this and, you know, working with different things, there's lots of different scales. You know, if a huge, you know, multi-million-dollar corporate company comes to us and they're like, "Come to a sound bath for us," it's like we have a pricing for that.
Okay.
If a community center wants us to come and do something for the community, that's going to be way different.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. And you can use the big ones to fund the small. Yeah.
Exactly. That's always kind of been the idea with when I first got into it. I was like, the only way this is going to work is by providing enough blood to the service through the commodity.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, so it is service in that kind of environment, but it is kind of this commodified fun thing. You know,
Right.
so it's like, okay, the commodity will pay for the service.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So kind of balancing that
Yeah.
in there, and then just having this scale of accessibility. When Home first started out, there were all these things on the Eventbrite that were like, if you're a yoga teacher, you can come for free for the first time. If you need help, use this code. It's 50% off. You know,
Right.
if you are any type of teacher in town, here's a code for 50% off. We wanted it to be accessible.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
But then as more and more people started getting kind of employed, we had to
Yeah.
remove some of those because when I would go
This
back
one
and
gets
look, I'd be like,
complicated.
I was
Yeah.
like, this person's used this code for every sound bath for a year, you know?
Yeah. I
Which-
used it 3 times. I'm sorry.
oh, I don't give a shit. I don't care. It was more so just being like, okay, we gotta make
Yeah,
sure
that's
that
when it gets
everybody's making
complicated is when money gets involved, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the future plans for the whole thing?
Yeah, totally. So we just did the big sound.
The world's largest sound bath.
largest sound bath. Yeah.
Did you actually get the world record?
Well, so we had a very wonderful conversation with Guinness World Records.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, and this was the second time. We tried to
Right.
get the world record in 2023,
Right.
and they, oh my God, I filled out so much paperwork and waited
Just
months
to
and months
get
and months.
Guinness.
And then they were like, great, that'll be $18,000.
$18,000 to get
Baseline price.
somebody to come out to confirm or just to get
Just to confirm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So that's interesting. So there could be many people who have world records who just don't have $18,000.
Yes.
So frankly, the Guinness Book of World Records, you know, I'm not going to try to offend anybody here, could very well be full of fraudulent world records because who has $18,000?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, okay, so this is kind of their model.
Right.
The individual world records, they're like $100.
I
So
see.
if
I
a
see.
corporation,
I
say Sony, Red Bull, Nationwide, somebody comes along and they're like, hey, we want to do something big and something that
Right.
is marketable. We
Right.
want to do something that will, get eyeballs and get press.
Because they want to get press too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Guinness World Records is essentially acting as a marketing company.
Right.
Which
Of
is,
course.
is a model that's going to allow them to survive and has allowed them to survive. So
Sure.
I totally understand that. But it was also disappointing to just be like, hey, this is a fairly relatively small community thing that is,
Yeah.
centered around mental health on the International Day of Peace and, all of these things. And they were like,
Nope.
we love that. That'll be $18,000. I was like, okay, again, going back to these non-emotional business transactions, I was like, okay, I get it.
Is there a record held now for the world's largest sound bath?
No,
So you were establishing a new one.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah, which is an additional cost.
I see.
So yeah, if
Got it. I
it's
have dollar
breaking
signs
a
on
record and setting a record, they have kind of different prices there.
Just
so.
dollar signs on everything. It's just like it's interesting having this conversation because it really is in a lot of ways this conflict between healing and giving back to the community, but also there's dollar signs, there's marketing, there's all this stuff on the other side.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you were saying
So we did that large event. It was great. We had 100 singing bowl players.
that seems like a record.
It was the largest collaborative sound bath in the world.
Okay.
Just the official Guinness World Records, not a thing.
Right.
But it was wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. It was incredibly taxing on me.
I'm sure.
On all fronts. I had a great team, but it was just
Logistics.
the logistics were bonkers. I mean, thinking about everything from the porta potties to the badges to the EMS to the insurance to the every little thing.
Yeah.
So we did that. It was wonderful, and I had already felt my winds changing for the last year,
Okay.
and I was like, I'm ready to just let this go,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. So, but one thing I've found so much joy in is teaching. So about a year ago, I started teaching singing bowl workshops and sound healing classes and sound bath composition classes, and those have been so fun. We stopped doing the full moon and new moon ones. I don't know if those will come back. They might. We are still doing some of the larger ones. We're doing the museum again in the spring.
Cool.
We're going to do, I'm doing some smaller ones for like the winter solstice and New Year's. And, I'm also working on revamping all of my teaching courses and will be just doing a lot of teaching because now there's tons of practitioners, which is great.
And so where do you see this in 10 years?
I think that in 10 years, the offline in-person movement is going to explode.
Okay.
There's going to be such a tipping point that there will almost be this whole birth of new form immersive experience entertainment where the rise in technology meets the needs of community, and all of these new experiential venues were going to pop up because people are trying to pull ideas out of their ass to get people to pay money for experiences nowadays. Which I can appreciate the kind of progressive and state-of-the-art qualities that some of these are doing.
I was at this experiential museum in New York City. I forget the name of it. It's right by the World Trade Center, but there was a room in there that it's a dark room. There's like a low layer of fog on it. You lie on the ground,
and
they've somehow connected the subwoofer to the floor.
Oh yeah.
So you're lying there, and there's a sound space going on with blinders for everybody. But then, a lion will roar or something, and the entire floor just kind of goes like this.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
That's
and I was
so
thinking,
cool.
I want to go there late at night and play house music or something for the entire thing. Yeah.
That would be so sweet. I really wanted to build a yoga studio here in town that had butt kickers in the floor, which is probably what's doing that.
What's a butt picker?
They're essentially these like transducers that pick up low frequencies and play they shake at the fundamental of the sound source you're setting.
They're called butt pickers?
Butt kickers.
Butt kickers. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how, you get like a lot of rumble in seats.
I love that idea. I've had this idea for a yoga studio because when I go to yoga a lot, and I always I don't want just like background music, right? If you're going to have music, right?
Yeah.
And some of the classes that I've loved the most are when they really are intentional with it, and when the sound system is really good, like it wraps around you, you know. And then lights too. I have this idea where it's like these awesome lights and like a cool sound system and all this, but the amount of money you'd have to put into something like that, and
Totally.
and yoga's, I think the margin there is probably pretty hard to,
100%.
Yeah. But yeah. Oh well.
Yeah. I dreamed up a whole wellness studio that was going to be a lot like that.
Lights,
Killer
lights
sound,
and-
killer lights,
Dude.
immersive.
I have another friend who wants to do it too. One of these days, man, we should all, because my friend
connect,
does
yeah.
stuff in,
Mhm.
yeah. So beyond the sound bath stuff and the home stuff, like what do you what's Jesse? What do you like to do? Like what's
Yeah.
beyond all that stuff? What's
Man, I mean this.
I'm sure the sound bath stuff is pretty much all encompassing a lot of the time, but like, you know.
Yeah, they were for the last 4 years. It
Yeah.
was such a big thing. So before that, I ran a poetry publishing company.
Okay.
It was called Secret Midnight Press. It was a few friends and I, and we did small batch poetry publications, really based around mental health.
Okay.
We would put together a yearly poetry festival here in town. That was like this Ren Fair meets Burning Man kind of idea called
Right.
Atlas Black. It was very, very cool.
Cool.
Kind of avant-garde. And then we did, some poetry tours. We did, European poetry tours. We did domestic poetry tours, and we hosted open mics for years. And so poetry is a huge, huge part of my life.
All right.
So,
All right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm working on a new collection of poetry. I'm working on a bunch of ambient music with a bunch of different artists. That's all going to be up online, so putting out a ton of, since I'm stepping back from doing the sound baths full, like all the time,
Right.
I'm making space so that I can make some original music,
Right.
working on some hip hop and dance songs. Used to do a lot of like hip hop stuff and hip hop production.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes. Yeah. I've got one older brother.
And what does he do?
He is also an artist. He's had to work most of his life,
Right.
And there's some complications there.
Sure. Always.
But he's brilliant.
Is he still here?
Yeah, he's still
Okay.
in Columbus.
Nice.
He's in Columbus. He's a very, very brilliant person.
And your parents are still around?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm very close with most of my family.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So everybody's kind of in their own space. But
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
love my parents.
And you're going to stick around Columbus, you think?
No. No,
Me neither, actually.
So, I just spent 3 weeks in Japan,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? One of the things that's been on my bucket list my whole life is to live in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And I'm not married. I don't have kids.
I have the same exact feeling, like I'm doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do this now.
You absolutely should. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm taking this winter to sort through all of my belongings, figure that out.
Get rid of it all.
Get-
Get it all. Throw
Yeah.
it all away, except for the keyboards.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep
yeah.
all the music gear.
Give music here.
Figure out, a few things, try to line some stuff over there. I'm doing self-taught Japanese lessons, like workbooks, videos, podcasts, and things like that for the
Right.
last 6 months.
Right.
And then in January, I start school for Japanese.
Oh, nice. It's a very difficult language.
Incredibly difficult, but it's so fun. And it's been really, 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 I've had so much fun.
Because there's like
I love
three
it.
different alphabets. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hiragana, katakana, and kanji.
Yeah.
So I've got hiragana and katakana down.
The kanji one is the one that's.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
There's 10,000 kanji.
Yeah.
And they're borrowed from Chinese.
Yeah.
And realistically, they're they say in like daily use 97% of the time you're only going to use about 1,000.
Sure.
But to be proficient, to pass the N1, which is the top proficiency test,
Yeah.
you have to know about 2,200.
Uh,
And what's crazy is they have the on and the kun sounds. One is the sound that it adopts from China, and the other is the sound that it has within Japanese. So you have to memorize the Chinese sound, the Japanese sound, what it represents, and how it fits into context. So,
Yeah, I lived in Korea for a couple years when I was
cool.
like 30 or so teaching English, and I wish I'd learned how to speak Korean. I learned a little bit, but you can learn how to read it because their alphabet is one of the it's a legitimately invented alphabet invented by this King Sejong, who based the characters on the shape of his wife's mouth when she made the sounds. So there's only 27
amazing.
characters, and you can pick it up in a day.
What a love story.
Yeah. He was an interesting king, from what I read.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mick Swagger.
Mick Swagger. Yeah.
I saw that on the internet. I was just going to ask what exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
So it's funny you bring that up. So Mick Swagger was a trilogy graphic novel series that I spent a few years writing.
Oh, all right.
And I started writing it in late high school. It took place in the future.
Yeah.
And it was about how artificial intelligence had evolved to this point where every brand created a mascot that was a fully sentient AI sort of representative. And they made them all into pop stars and celebrities and all of these things. And so that there were no more human pop stars and or celebrities.
Right.
But they were all just intellectual property that were shared, and it was all big business, and it was all, all these
Right.
huge crossovers, and essentially exactly what's happening now.
Yeah, we're getting there.
So
Yeah.
Mick Swagger the email address that I have for all of my Mick Swagger stuff is the artificial intelligence entertainment. So it's the AI entertainment at gmail.com. And, I've had that email address for like 18 years.
It's like a Black Mirror episode come true.
Totally. Yeah. And when it was such a cool idea. I loved Mick Swagger. So it was going to be a music act
Okay.
that went hand in hand with the graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
The graphic novel was essentially, he was like the first big AI. He was the original. He was owned
Mick
by this
Swagger.
guy. And there was a third, this is crazy too, because it plays into it. There was a third government movement rising to power, and it was called New Modern. And New Modern wanted to use the IP of Mick Swagger to promote New Modern. And he basically said, I'll never get involved in your politics. Murdered him, framed Mick Swagger. Mick Swagger is sent to be shut down. Mick Swagger is modeled after the last human rock star named Julian Gold. So you would have like albums coming out and singles coming out. You would have Julian Gold's music coming out. You would have Mick Swagger's music coming out. You would have the other characters. They would have albums coming out. Then they would all be doing songs together. And we were talking with different artists of playing the different characters. So we
Right.
were like, oh, we're going to have, there was a t-shirt company, and it was this robot, this AI named Miss Sugar. She was this Southern belle. So it was Miss Sugar's Sweet Teas. So you could go to Miss Sugar's Sweet Teas and buy her t-shirts online
Right.
and get that merchandise. But then she would also have like songs and stuff. And then there was a whiskey sales AI personality named Dusty Crates. And we were going to do a collab with Jack Daniels. So it would be like Jack Daniels' Dusty Crates version of whiskey.
How long ago did you write this?
I was like 18, 19, 20.
Wow. Prescient.
Yeah.
God help us all.
It was.
Yeah. Soon to be a major motion picture, probably.
Oh my God. It was another one of those things that was so devastating to me because I poured years and years and years into writing this trilogy,
Right.
and interweaving all of the interactive elements, because it was going to be music videos, it was going to be short films, it was going to be
Right.
graphic novels, all of this merchandising and all this really, really fun stuff.
Yeah.
This was before there was a ton of like really immersive storytelling.
Right. You had a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were some companies and some, people that were interested in supporting it, but it never
It's
took
never
off.
too late.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about it a bunch, and I was like, it'd be funny to essentially do Mick Swagger now,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
like bring it back and actually involve, because, this huge K-pop deal just went through, and it's the first ever signed AI artist, and it was like this like $200 million, and it's just this AI personality. I was like, this is literally Mick Swagger.
Yeah.
And Mick Swagger was modeled after some of what was happening in K-pop, later on when I started doing it, and I was like, this is crazy.
It's interesting if you did it now, because it would almost be like, is this actually is this actually happening? Right? Like it's like a question of, is this real or is it not real? Because it actually is happening in
Yes.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, you should do it. Yeah.
Which is funny you say that, because that was part of the graphic novel, was time travel, and like was, basically finding out that in the future, what we call UFO sightings here today is actually AIs being sent through a rip in time to go and collect observational data to take back to program AI.
Wouldn't it be strange if you found out that this all ended up becoming true? This thing you wrote,
Yeah.
and you ended up being some sort of like a prophet of some sort. People would be like, he knew before everybody else knew, and now the AIs are actually coming from outer space and breaking through.
Right.
Anyway, just a thought I had.
Can you imagine all of that's called Mick Swagger? So funny.
Yeah. I have just a few more here. Usually,
Sure.
I don't even need to use my list, but because we get to most.
You said
things.
you were also leaving Columbus. Where do you want to go?
Well, I lost my job earlier this year, so I went to Mexico City. I'd never been to Mexico City. You been?
A dream of going.
Dude, I'm telling you, go there before you go to Japan because Mexico City is. Anyway, I love it there. Yeah. I spent about a month and a half there in spring, and then went back for my birthday just like last week for a week. And
that's right. That's
every
what you
time I
said.
go back there, I'm just like, number one, America's not fun right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's got
yeah.
bad vibes. So yeah, I'm really trying hard to get some remote like podcasting or video editing work, which is my business, so I can just move to Mexico City for like 5-6 months, as long as the visa will last at least, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Kind of digital nomad it because I don't have any kids. I'm not connected, so
Totally.
yeah. I mean, what am I doing in Columbus is the question I ask myself because everybody here has a house and is married for the most part, and it just
for
feels
sure.
like, I feel out of place sometimes.
I
you
get
know
it.
what I mean? Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
That was one of the big reasons why I wanted to leave. I was
Yeah.
like, I got to go be with my
And
my
life
people.
is too fucking short to
Definitely.
be, you know what I mean? So,
Time's flying right now.
yeah. And I don't know, all the fun stuff happens outside of your comfort zone. People don't realize this. They're afraid to do things, but like, that's where the fun stuff's going to happen. That's where the
Absolutely.
gold stuff is, you know?
Yeah, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Always. All the fun stuff I look back on, I was like resistant to at first, but then did it anyway. And I was like, well, thank God I did that because.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same. Oh,
Yeah.
always, every time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a life lesson that I wish I'd learned earlier, but I'm glad I learned it eventually, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's one of the most important ones that most people never actually learn.
I think it's because they don't have a lot of encouragement or examples that they know. They see them in movies.
Truth.
They hear them in stories, but there's a disconnect there.
Right. You got a favorite song right now?
Oh man, favorite song right now.
One of the top three. One of the top three.
Henryk Górecki, Polish composer.
Okay.
I just discovered this. It's, I think it was written in the 70s. Symphony Number 3, Opus 36. It's the Symphony of Sorrowful Songs. It's 3 movements, all done by a solo sopranoist. It's opera, and each one is a different lament. The first one is Mary, I think, after losing Jesus, and I'm pretty sure. The second one is a message written on a Gestapo prison wall, and the third one is a woman who lost her child, is looking for her child in the war. And it is just, oh my God. I have listened to the third movement so much in the last week. It is profound. It is so devastatingly beautiful. That's it right now for me.
Yeah, same one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird, right?
Yeah,
Small
right.
world.
Yeah.
What brings you joy?
Oh man, what brings me joy?
I mean, we know to a degree already, but
yeah, a lot of things bring me joy. I love. The first thing I wanted to say was tea. I'm obsessed with tea.
All right.
I love tea.
Any particular flavor of tea?
Yes, my favorite tea is lapsang souchong. It's like a smoked tea. It's
Japan will be good for you.
Well, it's funny. So it's actually not a Japanese form of processing. They do not have Japanese lapsang souchong.
Oh.
But I centered a huge part of my trip to Japan around tea because they're
Sure.
very famous for their green tea. Japanese tea is green tea.
Yeah, I did the ceremony there. It's really super.
Matcha.
Yeah.
Matcha ceremony. Their green tea, there's sencha, their matcha, and there's all of those kind of break down into different kind of qualities in the way they're grown and processed. But there's one guy in Japan who processes tea through the methods of creating a lapsang souchong, through smoking it essentially.
Huh.
And I found this guy's information online. He won all these tea awards like 10 years ago.
Right.
And he just happened to have his farm in the prefecture I was visiting for tea. And I was like, oh my God, I found his farm. I found his email address and I emailed him. I was like, hey, look, this is my favorite kind of tea in the world. He does his by burning Japanese whiskey barrels, and he smokes the tea in Japanese whiskey barrels.
Right.
I was like, I would love nothing more on this trip while I'm here to come to your tea farm, to meet you and to buy your tea. And he said yes.
Sure.
So I took, this hour-long train ride and this taxi ride out into the country and went to this guy's tea farm, and he made me a cup of his Lapsang Souchong, and it was just, to me, it was one of the best moments ever. I was just like, this to me is so deep to just my level of like love.
I love
like,
that.
Yeah, it was really special to me.
And almost more than that, I love the fact that all it took was just an email that you didn't think maybe he would answer, but why not? People oftentimes will do that. Yeah.
That's literally been my whole life is asking, and why not?
Just ask.
I emailed Ford when I was 17.
Yeah.
Ford. And they just come out with the Ford Flex.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, can I have a free Ford Flex to tour around the country in? I'll take photos, write about it, and post it on my blog and on MySpace. And they said yes.
You are an entrepreneur.
They said, yeah. I was like, this is what I'll do. And they said yes, but I was also suffering from crippling depression. So I ignored the paperwork for 6 months.
Oh,
and when I finally did it and sent it back to them, they were like, dude, this was 6 months ago. And I was like, shit.
Could have driven that Ford Flex all over the country.
I know. So funny, man.
Wow. Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
The question that I usually ask at the end of the podcast is, what do you think happens when we die? When we move on to the next, whatever it is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're obviously experiencing time right now.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. Like I always see it as just like as a lightning bolt. Just like we are just the little edge of that lightning bolt. And so, I mean, the whole thing exists, and then that just discovers a pathway. So we're just discovering a pathway right now in a signal going in one direction, but that doesn't mean that it's the only direction that exists. It just means that's the route we're traveling, experiencing. I think that it's going to be like waking up, whatever it is. I think it's going to be wonderful. I actually was thinking about this earlier today. I was like, what would be crazy is if like we wake up from this and it's literally just one dream in another life. And then we live a whole day of that life, and then we fall asleep again. And then we have a whole other life, and then we wake up, and then eventually we have to get through that whole second life. And then when we die, then it keeps going out layer by layer.
Yeah.
And I was like, but our consciousness follows it all the way out. I was like, that would be insane.
That would be insane.
I don't know if that's how it happens. All I know is that I have had family and friends pass away that I still experience, see, and hear from. And I'm like, I know that this beautiful mesh, this brushstroke, whatever it is so poetic and that's the only way that we can understand it and experience it. Even if it does wrap up and this is it, a story has to have an ending in order for it to be
true.
It's
true.
Actualized.
It gives the life meaning, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm really happy to be here.
I mean, geez, it's a miracle, right?
It's amazing.
How strange it is to be anything at all, as they say.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Neutral Moke Hotel.
Yeah.
Is there anything that Jesse would like to promote before we wrap up?
Oh man, I feel like right now, I think one of the things I would love to promote is encouraging people to make that leap of faith towards themselves, whatever that looks like.
I love this.
Now.
Take a chance.
Take a chance.
Get out of that comfort zone.
Get out of the comfort zone. And I'm not saying necessarily buy a ticket and go to a country. I'm saying take a step in and like make room for the voice of your heart to be heard. I feel like right now the best way that we can help each other and help the world is by learning to hear our deeper wants and needs and being able to bring into the world and into our lives something that reflects that, so that we have just, people talk about authenticity a lot. And if we can just have a bunch of really authentic people walking around, I think that it would be great for the nutrition of the soil of reality to see what grows from there,
Yeah.
And I think this winter is really just going to be massive for a lot of shedding, metaphorically, and a lot of people to come out next spring and just feeling different and feeling ready. So I say whatever it looks like to make that possible.
Jesse Cale, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Great to get to know you. Great to get to hear your story. And yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you having me. This was so fun.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Of course. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
And that was Jesse Cale. I learned from that interview that the happiest chord is the F-sharp major chord. I did not know that. But then I played it on my guitar, and I was like, yeah, that is a happy chord. Always learning. Thank you so much, Jesse, for coming on the podcast. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about home sound baths, you can go to homesoundmeditation.com. That's HOM soundmeditation.com. You can find them on Instagram at Home Sound Baths. Maybe there's somewhere near you can bathe in sound. And you can follow Jesse on Instagram at Jesse Cale. That's JESSECALE. Those will all be in the show notes as well. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and several other social media platforms at 1FJeffPod. Patreon, Patreon subscribers. I'm a big fan of all of you. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you are listening to this podcast and you are not a Patreon subscriber, might I ask you a favor? Might I ask you to go to patreon.com/1FJeff and sign up. For as little as $5 a month, you can help support the podcast and you can get some extra content, more of which will be coming now that it's 2026, because I have a lot of thoughts running through my head these days, and they're going to come out at some point. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, you're going to get to hear them. Some of you are maybe thinking, what if I don't want to hear them? Well, there will be other things for you. Some photographs, some unreleased parts of other episodes. It's a smorgasbord. Well, I wouldn't say it's a smorgasbord, but it will be a smorgasbord. How do you pronounce that? Smorgasbord? Whatever. Subscribe to the Patreon page, please. I would really appreciate it. And in honor of the new year, I'm going to go back to Rumi for some wisdom, insight, etc. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I'll see you next week.
Very good, Jeffrey.